Let's now start this bulletin by telling you about the recent updates from Hong Kong. Now, before the COVID-19 pandemic swept through Hong Kong, the city-state was up in arms against mainland China over a controversial extradition bill. And as COVID-19 cases slow down to a trickle, these tensions are flaring up yet again. This time over another controversial bill that seeks to criminalize any insults to the Chinese national anthem. Legislators in the Hong Kong Assembly came to blows over this controversial bill. This is the second time this month that clashes have broken out between the pro-China and the pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong. Some of the pro-democracy lawmakers were forcefully removed from the chamber by security guards. The scuffle broke out in the House committee, which is tasked with reviewing bills before lawmakers vote on it. The committee chair's position has been vacant since October. Pro-democracy lawmakers have been using delaying tactics to ensure that an appointment is not made. On Monday, however, pro-China legislators unilaterally appointed an official to lead the committee. This enraged the pro-democracy camp, which considers the move to be illegal. Some lawmakers tore up the assembly rulebook and threw it at pro-China officials. The bill is scheduled to have a second reading on May 27th in the Hong Kong legislature, and protesters are calling for a citywide demonstration on that day. Although Hong Kong participates as a separate entity in sporting events, they have the same national anthem as China. Sporting fans have often booed at the Chinese national anthem when it is played inside a stadium. And now Beijing passed a bill against insulting its national anthem. But as per the agreement between mainland China and Hong Kong, all laws passed by the Chinese Communist Party will have to be ratified by the Hong Kong legislature. We are now being joined by Laurel Cho, a journalist from Hong Kong. Laurel, thanks so much for joining us. So can you begin by telling us about this new controversial bill that makes it almost illegal to insult the national anthem in China? And does it enjoy the leader, Carrie Lam's support?
Yes, Carrie Lam absolutely wants this bill to pass. The government has warned the Legislative Council that they need to pass this bill as soon as possible. So the bill criminalizes insulting the national anthem, and you can be put in jail for up to 3 years and fined almost $7,000. And of course, people in Hong Kong are afraid that this is just another sign of Beijing tightening its grip on the city. And people are also afraid that this will spark a fresh wave of protests as we approach the 1-year mark anniversary of last year's protests.
Right. Now, as we just discussed that, people often boo the Chinese anthem at sporting events. So what lies ahead in Hong Kong? Will this curtail the freedom further, even in the light of the pro-democracy protests, which are kicking off again?
That is the exact fear, that this law will give more ammo to the pro-establishment government to punish protesters, to arrest people, to put people in jail, that this will further curtail freedom of speech in a city where freedoms and rights have been eroding since the handover in 1997.
Right. Now tell us a little bit more about these pro-democracy protests underway in Hong Kong. Have they resumed, even though there is still a fear of a second wave of COVID-19 infections?
Since January, the protests have sort of calmed down because of the epidemic, and also because a lot of the protesters have been arrested or they were injured, and they sort of saw this time as a recovery time. But with infection rate being quite low in Hong Kong, the protests have started up. And even since January, there have been flare-ups here and there with tear gas and pepper bullets being used by the police. But right now, it seems like there will be a resurgence pretty soon of real protests on the streets.
Right. And now the Carrie Lam government is also infamous for even punishing teachers who were protesting in Hong Kong. So how do we see this controversial bill being viewed in Parliament in the future?
Well, the bill will probably pass at this point, now that there is a pro-Beijing lawmaker in the House committee who controls when bills are seen. So this bill might pass as soon as June, and some are even saying it'll pass on June 4th. Which is the anniversary of the Tiananmen massacre. So if that happens, we can be sure to see quite a lot of activity on the streets and people being quite angry.
Right. All right. Laurel, thank you so much for joining us and for all your inputs.
Thank you.
Now let's move on. The medical staff at a hospital in Brussels staged a silent protest against Belgium's Prime Minister, Sophie Walms. The Prime Minister was on a non-official visit to the St. Pierre Hospital in the national capital when she was confronted by the hospital staff. Doctors and nurses welcomed the Prime Minister by turning their backs on her motorcade. Medical workers claim that their work is not being appreciated or acknowledged by the government, and there has been a certain backlash against the government's move to recruit unqualified staff to carry out nursing activities. The staff at the St. Pierre Hospital was seen standing in two separate lines with their backs turned to the Prime Minister's car. Belgium is all set to exit the 2-month lockdown starting today. Schools, zoos, markets and other public places will partially reopen over the course of the next few hours. Belgium is one of the worst hit countries in Europe from COVID-19 with more than 9,000 deaths and 54,000 cases so far.